years and far more than $300,000 spent, I found that not only could I lose the weight and make it effortless, so I don't have to use my willpower to maintain my weight. That was a huge thing, but that I could also make my brain work better than I ever thought it could, and that I could be a higher performing individual than I ever thought was possible. Most people don't feel better and have everything work better when they're in their mid-40s than they did in their mid-20s or even as a teenager, but I do. And the answer to this, or the reason all this works, is because when you change the environment around you or the environment inside you, your biology responds. You don't will your biology to do something, you give your biology a signal, and the signal your biology listens to isn't what you want. It listens to what the environment tells it. So I consciously manipulate the inputs to my body so that it will behave itself. And when it does that, it unleashes a huge amount of willpower and energy. I change my diet, and I change the way I exercise. I change the temperature of things around me. I change the type of light that I'm exposed to, the time I sleep, the time I eat, the time I exercise. Those matter greatly because bottom line is my body's an amazing piece of equipment that is designed to survive in the environment around it. So it senses and responds to that environment. It doesn't sense and respond to what I want very well. So I'm going to stop using my willpower, wasting it on trying to make my body do things, and instead say, this is the lever, this is the trigger, this is the switch I can throw that will make my body listen and respond. And the idea that, well, you're healthy enough, screw that noise. It's not about being healthy enough. It's not about being strong enough. For me, it's about performing at the level that I choose to perform. And I can then decide where I want to put my efforts. I can spend more energy on being a father. I can spend more energy on being an entrepreneur. I could spend less energy on things that don't do anything useful for me or anyone else. And having control of my energy, having more energy, and being able to allocate it intelligently is pretty valuable. But if I'm running at half my total possible energy because I have things I don't know about, then I'm not going to do all the things that I want to do. With biohacking, I talk a lot about changing the environment outside of your body and inside of your body so that you have full control of your biology. And changing the things outside your body, like food and exercise, those are kind of obvious, but very few people pay attention to sleep. I've always been a night owl, and I'm still a night owl. That isn't something that makes me a good person or a bad person. It turns out some people have a longer circadian window. So for me, the 24-hour day is more like 25 and a half hours. People who like to wake up really early in the morning, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, usually have a short circadian window, like 23 or 23 and a half hours. So there's normal variances in people, but listening to your circadian rhythm and getting quality sleep and doing things like avoiding exposure to bright lights at night, it's really important. So my career has had me travel extensively. For quite a while, I was commuting from the west coast of the United States to London and back every month, which gave me many trips to experiment with jet lag and to understand circadian things. And I do realize that when I was obese, I would sit in a room with 1,000 watts of bright halogen light late at night, studying and reading and doing work and things like that, which is something that contributes to obesity that no one talks about. So what I do now is, in the Bulletproof Labs here, I have circadian compliant lighting. So there's red LEDs at night. I can see just fine, I can do my work, but the meat in my body, my nervous system, understands. It gets a signal from the environment that is actually nighttime. So it starts secreting melatonin. If I turn the bright white lights on, it stops secreting melatonin for 4 hours. Melatonin is the sleep hormone. You don't sleep well without melatonin. So what if our use of street lights and these little blue LEDs on everything in our houses is radically changing our body's ability to get quality sleep? So in my house, the lighting is different, and I am absolutely focused on quality sleep, not necessarily length of sleep. And what I found through digging through research is that the largest study ever done of sleep duration, the one with the most granular data that came out of it, showed that people who lived the longest slept 6.5 hours a night. People who slept 8 hours a night died more than people who slept 6.5 hours a night. What's going on there? People who sleep 9 hours a night were far more likely to die than people who slept 7 hours a night. It's not that less sleep makes you live longer, it's that healthy people need less sleep, so they die less. As your health improves, and as my health has improved, my requirement for sleep has gone down a lot. For the past, I'd have to look at my phone to tell you the exact number, but let's just say for the last 935 nights, the average amount of sleep I've had is 5 hours and 59 minutes of sleep. I am so healthy, I've changed my mitochondrial function to the point that my body does its sleep stuff in less time. And that's really amazing. When you think about the difference between needing 9 hours a night to feel rested and needing 6 hours a night, that's 3 hours a day. That's enough time to get another degree. Like if you studied 3 hours a day, you could really constantly earn PhDs if that was your thing. You could start a company. You could learn to play an instrument. You can do a lot with that time. And you could also use it to sleep. There's nothing wrong with sleep, but if you're getting inefficient sleep, you're seriously wasting a huge amount of your potential. One of the ways I was able to start Bulletproof while very successfully working as a vice president at a large publicly traded company is that I hacked my sleep. One of the other things I've done to increase my performance is I decided to live in an area with less environmental stress. So I live on a 32-acre organic farm that's about 40 minutes from an international airport. So I can still do the same business travel that I've always done for my work and to help people learn more about their biology. But my family grows all of our own food. The beef that I eat eats grass that grows on the front acreage of my property. And the air I breathe is some of the cleanest you can breathe anywhere. The wild-caught salmon that I eat swims 10 minutes away from my house. So I suddenly have this amazing forest that I live in, but I'm not isolated from society, and I don't have to live a 9-hour drive in the hills by 4-wheel drive or anything like that. And what I found is that when I make changes like that, where I actually get to see nature, I perform better, I'm calmer, and the measures of systemic stress, things that I actually train, things like heart rate variability, are higher. Heart rate variability is one of those environmental things that most people aren't aware of. The spacing between your heartbeats, just the pattern of the spacing, will change based on how stressed your nervous system is. It's not how stressed you think you are, it's how stressed your body is, whether or not you're aware of it. And I train the people that I coach in how to tell the difference. How do I know when my body is responding with stress to an environmental situation? Well, you can tell because there's a feeling in your body. It's just a feeling that no one teaches you about, except maybe an advanced meditation teacher. But since there's no way for me to say, hey, it feels like X when your heartbeat is spaced a little differently. We don't have words for that mean anything. So there's an iPhone app, one I use with my clients, where you clip a sensor on your ear, you look at your phone, and when you're in a state of what's called parasympathetic dominance, when your rest and relax functions are activated, it feels one way. And when you switch out of that mode into sympathetic dominance, the fight or flight response, it feels different. So I can tell you, when I'm in an environment that has more nature and less stress in it, less traffic, less commuting, that my sympathetic fight or flight response is much lower. That means my performance is higher. Technology gives us more control of our environment and more control of our bodies and our minds than we've ever had throughout all of recorded history. It's an amazing opportunity. I do this 40 Years of Zen program, and it's something that I've developed for clients. And we hook electrodes, 8 of them, up to your head and run them through custom computer software that shows you exactly what your brain is doing, so that you can have the same brain waves as someone who's spent 40 years of daily Zen practice. Holy crap, that's so big. So I have huge hopes for technology. We also, here at the Bulletproof facility, have 4 different kinds of pulsed electromagnetic frequency devices that improve your performance, that increase stem cell growth, that increase blood circulation. Now, we also have a Wi-Fi radio. It turns out that technology is neither good nor bad. If we acknowledge that these electromagnetic frequencies, that the lights that we use, the magnetic fields that we work with, have an impact on our biology. Just acknowledge that there is an impact, whether it's good or bad. then we can start doing the core engineering required to build technology that gives us the internet, that gives us search engine, that gives us incredible convenience in our lives. We could build that technology to make us stronger, to make us perform better, or we could build technology unconsciously that makes us weak. When you look at aging, when you look at chronic degenerative conditions, you look at things like autism, things like Alzheimer's disease, these are not always a single cause. They're an accumulation of small insults. And I do believe that technology quite often is a major insult to our nervous system, to our immune systems. But it's usually not one thing, it's usually a big stack of things. So we should be building our Wi-Fi and our cell phone networks to use waveforms that are biologically compatible with the waveforms that our bodies use. Because at this point, the science is irrefutable. Our bodies do use electricity, they do use magnetism, and they do use chemistry. They use all of those things. And to somehow assume, without good science, that the power of a signal is the only thing that matters versus the shape of the signal, it's not a scientific assumption. And what I understand about biology, from what I've seen, is that it's different than that. I can use a laser on my head and it directly changes cognitive function. There is no question about that. And if people don't believe that, they can try it too. They can also cook their heads that way. So we need to pay more attention to our technology, but without the kind of abilities we now have, we never could have discovered these things. So now it's our responsibility just as human beings to use that tech to make the world around us more hospitable to our biology so that our bodies will do what we want. The other path that some of the transhumanists are arguing for is, we don't need our bodies anyway. My take on that is that our bodies do a lot of things we don't understand. I'm pretty happy that I have a body right now. I'm not that interested in uploading myself to the internet. There are people who think that's the path. I think we ought to maybe just make the technology that we have and the stuff we're developing, make it work better for us so that it's convenient, but it also keeps you vitally healthy. If you think about how food gives you energy, it gives you electrical energy. And a lot of people say, what, electricity? Like, I'm not a battery. Well, parts of you kind of are like that. Because what happens is you eat food and glucose or fat or protein, these things eventually, we hope, unless they're stored as fat or excreted, they turn into ATP, which is the primary thing that the mitochondria in our cells use. So they generate ATP, they use ATP to get an electron. That would be electrical. And once they generate that electron that fuels the cell, then they recycle ATP through a process in humans that's kind of like what most people know what happens in plants with photosynthesis. We don't use sunlight for that, though. We use sugar and oxygen in order to do it. But it's a process of generating energy, and at the end of the day, it is an electron. In fact, there's also something called a biophoton that's generated in this process as well, which is a single photon. Photons are the tiniest pieces of light that we have. So there is a light signaling layer in the body, and this can be measured. You can see it with very advanced physics devices that you would use to detect small things happening in space. You can turn that around and look at human beings and see that happening. I once had lunch with one of the inventors of modern Wi-Fi, a guy with one of the first patents in that field. He'd spent the last several years looking at what happens when he takes the diagnostic equipment meant for fixing Wi-Fi networks and he turned it around and he pointed it at people and said, oh my God, there's a huge signal in there and there's data in the signal. We can tell when someone's going to get sick based on what's coming out of their body. In fact, a lot of the inventors in that field end up reaching out to me and saying, hey, I have this new technology. I have 2 different devices upstairs on a shelf somewhere that work on detecting electromagnetic fluctuations that come from the human body. Most people don't understand this, but anytime there's an electrical flow, there's also the generation of a magnetic field. So the biggest magnetic sensor and magnetic field creator in your body is the heart, because it has so much energy, that heartbeat that constantly happens. There's a lot of ATP that is consumed in the beating of the heart. So you can measure this. This sounds crazy, but this is just how it works. There is a field around the heart. It's tipped about 8 degrees to the left, and it's shaped like a giant torus or a donut. And we know the direction, the magnetic, basically the direction of the magnetic fields and how they fluctuate. And this is the signal that all of us carry around our hearts. When you look at physics, we know that electromagnetic fields drop in strength over distance, but they never stop. So if I was to have a magnet and wave it around here, 1,000,000 miles away, there's still a signal from that magnet. It's just incredibly, incredibly tiny, and you would probably never see it. But what this means, and what we have shown, is that when my heart, or say when the magnetic field around my heart is acting in a certain way, that it will have an effect on your heart, because your heart picks up my heart picks up your heart. And you might say, okay, now you just sound like a crazy hippie, except I'm not. There are studies showing this. One of the most amazing things, and a lot of this research comes from the HeartMath Institute. I'm an advisor to them. The HeartMath people have a study where they measure the heart rate variability, that heartbeat spacing we talked about. They measure that in a human, and they measure that on a horse. And then the human walks into the horse's stall and doesn't touch the horse. The horse's heart rate variability will change to match the human's. This would not be possible unless there was communication at this level, and there is. And this is why we have, the pet whisperer people and people who are really good at communicating with animals. This is also why some people have magnetic personalities. It's because the magnetic field around their heart is less chaotic and it's higher amplitude, it's stronger. These are things that you can train and things that I have trained in myself. These are things that I work with my clients to train. And you do this because when you have a more ordered and a more varying heart rate, you feel better. You're a more vital, a stronger human being. You have better emotional regulation. You have more self-control. And the people around you can sense this. Another piece of evidence for this that's really interesting is that there are a ton of nerves going between the heart and the brain. And being our brain-centric type of Western culture, we like to think that the brain controls the heart. It's not like that. 80% of the nerves between the brain and the heart are pointed from the heart to the brain. So in my view of our biological system, the heart is both a transmitter. It has a magnetic field it generates that other things pick up, but it also receives magnetic fields from those things around us and communicates with our brain about that. So that's one of the reasons I think the idea of keeping my body intact is a really good idea, because we barely understand these systems. We know that there's something happening there and we have some good theories about it. We need a lot more science to understand this before we decide we can just replace the heart with a pump without having any effect on the human being. It does have an effect. There are about, I want to say about 140 years ago, maybe it's a little bit longer than that even, there was a split in science. This is in biological science. And one camp said the body is primarily electrical, and the other camp said the body is primarily chemical. And these two scientific camps basically threw tomatoes at each other until one of them kind of was discredited. That's not accurate. The body is neither chemical nor electrical, it's both. And if you don't believe me, then walk into a taser and see what happens. Like, we know if you put a strong shock on someone, something happens. We measure the flow of electrons across nerves. It's called a nerve conductance study. So we know we're electrical. We just like to think that we're chemical. And that's a broken model, because you can affect electricity with chemicals and you can affect chemicals with electricity. At the Bulletproof Labs here, I have multiple electrical devices that really radically change, say, muscle density or can trigger neurological change in people. There are small electrical things you can do to your head. I have 3 different machines that do that change neurological growth in the head with tiny, tiny electrical charges. Stuff like that shouldn't be possible if we were just chemical. So having the notion that we are a mix of those two things as part of our consciousness is really, really important. When you acknowledge that magnets may have an effect on your biology, and it may not be an obvious effect, that's something that says maybe I should pay attention to the fact that when I'm sleeping, my head is right up against a big magnetic source like a motor in my neighbor's refrigerator. It turns out that does disturb your sleep quality. So it's not a good or a bad thing that our bodies are this way, they just are. Even more recently, in the mid-80s, one of the top leaders of the Karolinska Research Institute in Stockholm, this is one of the top 10 medical schools on Earth where the Nobel Prize for Medicine is awarded. He kind of in secret wrote an incredible 800-page book documenting all the things about electrical activity in the body and how it could be used for healing. Currents of injury, just page after page. Stuff so dense that even though I'm pretty advanced on these things, when I read that book, you need to be a doctor to even open the pages. I go to read it and every other word is a medical term. Very, very deep science. He spent many years working on it. And after he wrote it, he said, you know, this is probably the end of my career. I'm retiring now. Because, of course, he was attacked for writing this thing. It was full of data and information. Maybe it had mistakes. It almost certainly did, like every scientific theory we've ever had isn't perfect. However, it was groundbreaking, and instead of accepting it and saying, well, let's pay attention, just the overall weight of inertia in science sort of swept this big work to the side, even though it came from a very, very lauded medical professional. This is still happening to this day, but with the rise of cloud computing, the rise of the quantified self, the rise of all this data, suddenly it's getting to be harder and harder to ignore an effect that you see in 1 million people when you have data from 1 million people. So you want to argue that bright lights at night don't affect sleep? Well, we can do studies with 20 people. What if we do studies with 2 million people and they record their results and put that up? At a certain point, the naysayers and the skeptics just start to look like buffoons. And that's what's happening now thanks to big data. Cold thermogenesis is this idea that if you expose your body to cold temperatures the way we evolved, where, oh, there's winter, we should adapt, that our bodies will burn fat and turn off inflammation and basically regulate themselves. We are animals at a certain level, and our biology expects there to be a summer, a fall, a winter, and a spring. And if you look at, say, the birth rate in certain months, it's much higher because it's normal for animals to mate in spring. Humans do the same thing. We like to think that we're sort of separate from those cycles, but we're not. When you use cold to tell your body, oh, it's nighttime, you sleep better. When you use cold to tell your body, burn fat, it will do that. So I experimented with different ways of controlling the vagus nerve, which is really one of the primary nerves in the body that controls inflammation and lots of other things in the digestive tract. And you can just put ice on your face. You basically put your face in ice water or run cold water in the shower over your face, and it calms inflammation and gives you more energy all day long. And from there I progressed to the point where for a while I was taking baths in 45-degree ice water for up to 20 minutes, half hour. And it sounds like this guy's insane. But what happens is this really predictable thing. You get in the water and your nervous system says, oh my God, I'm going to die. This is too cold. Get out. This is unpleasant. And you tell your nervous system, actually, no, just calm down for a minute. I'm doing this for a good reason. And after about 3 minutes of resistance, the nervous system just melts and it stops resisting. And all of a sudden, what was a really painfully cold ice bath becomes like a blissful experience. Your body generates a huge amount of endorphins, basically onboard opiates that make you feel really good, but also help to regulate inflammation. So then you get out of this before you start shivering, and believe it or not, you don't shiver for the first few minutes, and then you're a little cooler for hours and hours. And to get warm, your body burns hundreds more calories, it melts white fat, and it adds brown fat, which is this energy-dense kind of fat that you want to have. From there, though, I one time got first-degree ice burns over 15% of my body with some of these experiments, and it's uncomfortable and it takes a lot of ice. I progressed to installing a home cryotherapy chamber. I'm one of 2 people in the world who has these at their personal residence. And this is a machine that uses liquid nitrogen to supercool air to 270 degrees below zero. And once or twice a day for 3 minutes only, I stand in air that's so cold, it's colder than anywhere on Earth can be. What happens then is the peripheral cold receptors in my skin, they don't freeze. I don't get frostbite because air doesn't conduct temperature very well, but I can sense the air is cold. My body senses that. And in response, it goes, oh my God, there's an ice age coming. I need to be ready. So what does it do? It says time to melt fat, time to improve sleep quality, and time to turn off inflammation, but it does it in a very short period of time. So you get more energy, you heal faster, you feel better, you generate more collagen, so it increases your skin elasticity and things like that, and it takes 3 minutes a day. So this is a very profound use of a biological signal to tell the body, be ready for cold, even though I'm using a temperature that is not biologically possible. And when I'm working at night under red lights, well, the closest analog we have to that is firelight, which isn't very bright. And when I wake up in the morning, especially if I'm waking up early and I want to shift my sleep cycle window, I expose myself to really bright blue or green light, which can radically affect my circadian rhythm. There is no way to do this naturally. So what we're doing is we're taking signals that would have come as small signals from the environment, and we're making them big signals so the body will listen. And the reason I do that is that when you have what's essentially a lie detector telling your brain when it's confused and when it's not confused, the brain itself will regulate its behaviors. It will change in order to perform better. The brain's job as an organ is to optimize itself and to perform better. All we have to do is get it the right nutrition, the right environmental inputs, and then the right training. And there is more knowledge now about cognitive states and brainwaves than ever in all of recorded history. And I'm spending even more time with electrodes on my head, getting that signal so that my brain can perform at the levels it's capable of. It's tough to say what percentage of the day I spend on performance enhancement, training, or we'll call it self-maintenance, versus being a parent, versus running my company. A lot of times when I'm recording Bulletproof Radio, which is the #1 ranked radio show on health and fitness, I'm standing on the Bulletproof sleep induction mat, which is doing acupressure on my feet while I'm doing it. I've recorded lots of episodes with pulsed electromagnetic frequencies running on my body. In fact, I do reading when I'm in my hyperbaric oxygen chamber. I answer emails in there. So am I working when I've changed my environment so that it makes me stronger, even though I'm still working? This is one of those things that was free. I needed to buy a hyperbaric oxygen chamber, but I didn't lose any cycles. I had a choice. I could work in a brightly lit environment late at night, or I could work in an environment that was lit in such a way that I'm going to get better quality sleep later. It didn't cost me any time. So it's not about spending 40% of your time improving your performance and 60% of your time running your company. It's about making sure that when I'm running the company, everything in my environment makes me kick ass. And then I have a lot more energy to run my company, and I have a lot more free time to do self-maintenance tasks. I've looked at structured water, and I've, for many, many years, used advanced water filtration for my water. And one of the things that a lot of people don't understand is that water is the primary thing our bodies are made of. Just by weight, there's more water than anything else. And the cleanliness and the type of water does play a role. Also, our body's ability to store water matters. When you have properly formed collagen in your cells, you can hold a lot more water and you can carry electrons across that skin more easily. When you look at the way we think of electrons in the body, it's like, oh, we have a nervous system and that carries electricity. Yes, that's true. However, when you look at acupuncture and what we've learned there is a small current all over your body. And for that current to flow, you need adequate hydration and you need properly formed collagen. So we work as biohackers, at least, on making sure our bodies have the ability to build good collagen. I put collagen in my Bulletproof coffee most days because I want my body to have this healthy ability to store water. When it comes to having water as a liquid crystal that carries information from the environment around us, there is evidence to that. I wouldn't call it fully conclusive, well understood evidence, but there is compelling research that says there's something going on with water and that the water carries information in it. So I'm not an expert on the nuances of that. As a biohacker, I'm willing to go to unusual lengths to figure out what works. And if I see an experiment and I think it's unlikely to cause permanent damage, I'm willing to go there and try it out. So there's a couple of things I've done that probably would scare most people. One of them was when I was working on making my digestion work the way I wanted it, is I ordered some pig whipworm eggs from Thailand. This is a parasite, but it's a parasite that can't reproduce in the human body. So I infected myself with a parasite for 6 weeks. I just swallowed the eggs. And the idea there is that this parasite makes a substance that causes your immune system to start regulating itself better. It didn't work. I had no change in my digestion, but I did for 6 weeks have pig whipworms growing in my gut. After becoming a biohacker and spending almost 20 years on this stuff and hundreds of thousands of dollars, I've lost 100 pounds, increased my muscle mass, lowered my biological age. So when you look at my sympathetic nervous system response, it's that of a younger man. I've also used techniques that in total add up to more than 20 IQ points. So what I've done is I've increased my resilience, I've increased my cognitive performance, my memory performance, I've improved my immune system performance, I've increased my testosterone levels naturally, and I've basically put myself in every way I can measure in a better place than I was as a young man. In a normal human body, you get wisdom as you get older, but you get older and you lose physical performance. I've done the opposite. I'm actually healthier now in my 40s than I was in my 20s, and I perform better too.